Welcome to Takeaway Tuesday live at Symposium, where we are delighted to have with us from Ireland, Dr. Rosaleen McElvaney, and I'm hoping that I pronounced that correctly. But you are here and you're giving a couple of presentations at Symposium. One really kind of more focusing on therapeutic services with adolescents, but also you're having one that truly looks at disclosure. Mm-hmm. And so talk to us about disclosure and what you're teaching this week.
Yeah. So I suppose the workshop that I'm giving tomorrow is based on my book, Helping Children Tell About Sexual Abuse. And it's really kind of bringing together, I suppose, the last 15, 20 years of my clinical experience and my research on disclosure. So I'm really interested in the informal disclosure. So before they get to the point of the forensic interview, you know, who they've told, how it came to be that the disclosure happened. And that came from working as a clinical psychologist, first of all, in services for adults, counselling service where adults were coming for help many years later, not having perhaps told a soul, and in some cases not even told people at the time that they were reaching out for help for counselling. And then working with children in a specialist child sexual abuse unit in a children's hospital in Dublin, and meeting children who had actually told quite recently, and really being fascinated by, you know, what is it that makes the difference between the children that can tell and the children who haven't told and don't tell until adulthood. So this topic really fascinated me, and I did my PhD in Trinity College Dublin many years ago now, and it's just one of those topics that I don't know whether it won't leave me alone or I won't leave it alone, but it's just fascinated me so much over the years. And so what I find helpful at symposium and conferences like this is to kind of distill all the research that is out there on a particular topic and try and make it accessible to practitioners. So people who are working at the coalface who kind of need this information, but they don't have the time to read and plod through articles and books, etc. So I really, you know, love the opportunity to be here and to share all the stuff that I've been working on over the years and pulling together my colleagues' work and other people who are working in this area. And I suppose in the last 15 years, there are more and more people who have been interested in looking at disclosure. And so we have an abundance of research now that we can draw on, particularly research that's directly with young people. So I suppose most of my research is based on talking with children, adolescents, parents, about their experiences of disclosure and how that came about.
Well, with your expertise and your knowledge of talking with children and adolescents, and we know that there are so many reasons that drive reluctance, and that can be internal, external, and there is no magic one in the forensic interview that we can wave and then have a child be willing to talk with us. But what is your experience about what drives children either to disclose or not to disclose?
I suppose in terms of the not disclose, it's quite complicated, isn't it? And it's different for every child. But we know an awful lot more now about both the internal factors in terms of, you know, children who perhaps blame themselves, perhaps feel ashamed of what happened, know at some level that there's something wrong with this and being afraid they'd get into trouble. Sometimes they're afraid of the consequences of telling. Sometimes they want to protect people. It may be the person who abused them, or it may be their parents, protecting their parents from the distress that they know will ensue if they tell. So I suppose at all these different ecological levels, you know, at the person, at the family level, at the more social level, community level, and wider society. In terms of what helps children tell, I think one of the interesting pieces that have come out of a lot of qualitative research in the last 15 years is that when we started asking young people directly, you know, what was it that really helped you come to tell? One of the very key findings, you know, in my view, is that they were asked questions. Now, not necessarily that they were asked, have you been abused? But they were asked questions. So somebody noticed that something was off. Somebody noticed they didn't want to go and see a particular person. They didn't want to babysit. They were uncomfortable when someone came to visit. Somebody noticed and asked and gave them an opportunity to say something. And that very often it's an accumulation of those opportunities. I coined this term, the pressure cooker effect,
Yes.
in one of my first articles. And it's that idea of that there are a number of factors that come together to actually help a child tell. But it's, being asked by a teacher, being asked by a school counsellor, being asked by a parent, being asked by a sibling, being asked by a friend, what's wrong? You're feeling a bit down. I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately. I've noticed you don't want to go such and such a place. Is everything okay? Or one young person I'm remembering, her friend said to her, is he doing something to you? Because you always seem to be a bit funny when he's around.
Interesting.
Really direct.
Yeah.
And that is what actually helped that young person to finally tell an adult about what was happening.
Well, for those of us that work, I guess I would describe it maybe on the other side. So we generally get involved once a disclosure has been placed, kind of out in the open to whomever, and then the system, and we're part of the system, are contacted. Is there something that we can do as a field that would assist children and give them opportunities? I mean, obviously, what you're saying is it could be that just several people are noticing and asking, and eventually that child feels like, oh, I have a place, someone's paying attention. For those of us kind of after that disclosure, is there something that we can do that would be beneficial for those children, for those adolescents? Because we know that disclosure continues to be a process, that just because they share something with, say, a parent, doesn't mean they share everything.
Yeah.
And we want to continue that sharing. What would you say that we need to do as a field?
I suppose what the first thought that comes to mind is the whole kind of rapport building phase of the interview, and how important that is to be aware of the difficulties that there are for children, and then to meet this child in front of you and say, okay, this is a unique individual child. And while it's really helpful for me to know all the different factors that influence children in general, what is it about this child? So in that rapport building phase, short as it might be, to get a sense, I think it requires a lot of skill on the part of the interviewer to do a very kind of quick, dirty assessment at the beginning of the interview. How am I going to relate to this young person? Are they someone who is going to relate really well to me if I talk a lot or if I talk very little? Our body positioning. Where do I need to sit? Do I need to make really good eye contact, or do I need to kind of every so often just leave them alone?
Let them rest.
Let them rest, exactly. So I think that whole piece about getting to know the young person and then tailoring, obviously you follow your protocol, but tailoring the way you are with them to this particular child. It's all about, I think, making a connection and helping that young person feel as comfortable as it is possible, given they're meeting a complete stranger in a strange environment. Yes. But nevertheless, children, say very positive things about that nice lady or that nice man. It spoke to me in a really nice way. Even the tone of voice, the kind of gentleness. I think all those things really make a difference in terms of making a connection with the young person and just helping them feel at ease in as far as it's possible in that kind of a situation.
Well, one of the things that you just said reminds me of a statement that Dr. Ann Grafton Walker said years ago. And it's not that we talk with children, but we talk to a child at a time. And that's what you're saying that, and especially in that early rapport building phase of the interview, that we need to pay attention to this child. And it's not this child as a victim, but just this child.
Yeah.
And I will say that often I see interviewers they want to hurry this phase of the interview, or they're very robotic.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you go to school? What grade are you in? But you don't get a sense of who that child is. What are some things that we could ask in that beginning phase that would allow that child to have a voice?
Well, certainly I know protocols vary, but most of the interviews that I have looked at, videotaped interviews or heard people speak about, there is a piece around, getting to know the child and their interests and what is it that grabs them.
Yes.
So I think, that's a really good technique to help the child feel at ease, but also to show that you're really interested. You're interested in them, you're interested in their life, you're interested in what they find fun, and you're interested in what they find difficult as well. So I think communicating that interest, I think that point that you raised is really important, that, the job can get in the way of actually making a connection with the child. And there is something about, I know certainly when we do training, the importance of role play. And having the interviewer really be the child. And what would make you feel comfortable, and put yourself in that position. So I think empathy is really important for forensic interviewers, in terms of what might it be like for this child in this moment, talking to me. How can I reach them? How can I connect with them? How can I soften the connection a little bit? And I think, being at this symposium and meeting so many people are so passionate about their work. It's so lovely to be here surrounded by people who do the same kind of work. Because there's just a level of energy around, and even all the presentations I've been at, people love their jobs. For the most part. It's,
for the most part. There are days that this job is hard. I think that's true for all of us. I want to go back to what you had said about giving these children the opportunity to talk about something that they're passionate about. And one of the questions I love is just tell me about yourself. And whatever topic the child puts on the table, and generally they do that because they have a passion for it, whether it's, I think about this one boy who, it was bow hunting with dad, and another child raised Australian stick bugs, and that was another interviewer that had interviewed that child. But she was passionate about raising Australian stick bugs. They were important to her, and she could dialogue about that. And it was about that child in that moment at that time. And that's where we as interviewers need to be with that child.
And to be curious.
And
to communicate to the child, that is really interesting. Tell me more about that. And take that very curious, interested stance, no matter what it is they're talking about.
That is. And we don't need to know anything about it because the child is informing us.
Exactly. Sometimes the less you know about it, the better.
That's true.
You can be more curious.
That's true. Well, we just so appreciate you coming here today. I do have one final question for you. Obviously, as a trainer, so you have trained individuals in this field. And if you were talking to someone who's just completed a protocol training, so I laugh and say they've just learned their ABCs, they've graduated from kindergarten, and in essence, sometimes, unfortunately, we turn them loose in the world. What would be one thing that you would want to say to that baby interviewer, that brand new interviewer?
There's so many things I could say. I think the thing that I would pick is, imagine yourself at that age. Imagine you in the chair. And see how that helps you in the way you connect with that child. So it's like, connect with yourself when you were that age, and what it would be like to be sitting in a room with a stranger doing this.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate your words of wisdom. Encourage everyone, go to calio.org, and all of your research is there. And we cannot say thank you enough for being here at Symposium and then being here with us today on Takeaway Tuesday.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
If you'd like more information, please check out calio.org. Also look at the NCAC Virtual Training Center for different webinars and seminars that have been recorded with experts in the field. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please email me at the link below. Thanks and have a great day.